Great. Welcome back to the EDCO Evolve On conference, everyone. Just a reminder that the next session was pre-recorded, but the panelists will be joining us following the presentation to answer your questions. You're doing a great job of entering your questions in the Q&A, so keep that up. And don't forget to upvote those questions that you want to have answered live today. Don't forget, you can engage with your fellow attendees, either as a group or individually through the chat function. And it's a great way to share your thoughts on the presentation. I'm seeing a lot of that too, so keep it up. I'd now like to introduce our next session, Evolution in Diversity and Inclusion in the Workplace.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Evolution in Diversity and Inclusion in the Workplace. My name is Heather Madden with the County of Brant, and I will be the moderator for this session. We have two panelists today, Raj Sayan with Senior Economic Development Officer with the Town of Oakville, and Jason Felix, Trade and Investment Specialist, Ontario Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to commend EDCO for the bold step that the organization has taken, not only to create awareness, but also to advocate for diversity in the workplace. And I'm happy to be a part of the discussion and share my insights and experience. I hail from the Caribbean, Grenada to be specific. I came to Canada many years ago for studies originally. After completing graduate studies at the University of Waterloo, I ventured north to work with communities, the municipal government. So I've worked with a few communities in Northern Ontario, and now I'm with the provincial government with the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines, working as a trade and investment specialist. So I've worked with different employers, and I do have some insights to share as it relates to diversity and inclusion in the workplace.
Great, thank you, Jason. Raj?
Yeah, so thanks, Heather, and thank you to EDCO for putting this together. I echo Jason's comments there about really pushing the bar and pushing the boundaries here to have this discussion. So my background is in the municipal world. I've worked in bylaw enforcement, planning, and economic development. I also went to the University of Waterloo. And now I work for the Town of Oakville as their Senior ECDEV Officer. My portfolio mainly consists of business retention and expansion efforts for Oakville.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for taking time to talk about diversity, inclusion, equality in the workplace. It's very, very important. I think it's a conversation that needs to be talked about more often. And hopefully what we learned today, people can put into action in the workplace. So thanks again to the both of you. So topic of discussions, we have three amazing questions that I'm going to be asking each of you, and you can let everyone know your experience and maybe some takeaways they can have. The first question, building a multi-generational experience for both in the workplace and outside the workplace. So Jason, if you would like to speak on that.
Definitely. I think working today means joining a team with a range of different ages, right? So we're talking about the traditionalists, the baby boomers, the millennials, the Gen X, and the Gen Z. So it therefore means that diversity, it goes beyond race and ethnicity. It also includes age, right? And there is a clear difference in values, communication skills, work habits of each generation. Each generation does stuff differently. And because of that, if you don't understand and appreciate the difference, then there can be great tension and disagreement. So I think what has worked for me is number one, appreciating the differences of the different generations. For instance, the younger generations like to send short text messages when they're communicating, right? The older generations, they pretty much like to pick up the phone and call and have a conversation or send a long, detailed email, right? So different ways of communicating, different ways of doing stuff because we were born at a different time and different things were prevalent at the time. So that has shaped us in different ways. So we do things differently. And I think once we learn to appreciate that difference, I think one of the things that we need to do next is to replace the negative stereotypes that we have about the different generations with positive ones. And what I mean is that the older generations look at the younger generations as being lazy, entitled, tech obsessed, over eager. And the flip side of that, the younger generations look at the older generation as being, stubborn, difficult to work with, set in their ways, and the list goes on and on. But I think our differences should not separate us. Our differences should bring us together because we complement each other. Let me give you an example. I was working on a project, and being the millennial that I am, I was quick to come up with a new solution to a new and innovative solution to solve a problem, right? And one of the senior persons on the team basically pulled me aside and said, why, why are you so eager to come up with a new solution? Why not try the true and try, right? And at the end, we were able to strike a balance and go with something that we have used for a long time. But that was the wisdom of the older, more senior person on the team giving us some insight. So once we come together, there are great things that can come from the different insights, different ways, sorry, that we do things, and definitely makes for a better outcome.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jason, for diving into your experience on that. Rajdan, do you have anything to add to that on your experience in the multi-generational experience?
Yeah, so I think like for me, when you ask this question of multi-generational experiences, it really made me reflect on how diversity and inclusion has sort of morphed and changed. So like if we take it back in history and we think about the times of war and when men were called into the battlefield and the factories were left vacant and desolate, who got pulled into the workforce? It was women. Women were pulled into the workforce to keep those factories going, but they weren't necessarily pulled into the workforce because of their skill or their knowledge base or any of that. It was mainly just to keep things going. So while we could reflect on something like that as a moment in time where diversity and inclusion were seen, I think in those times you really need to reflect upon why and the circumstances that resulted in that. And how do we sort of build on that and build on that momentum and not just make it something that needed to happen just for the sake of it happening. And then, if we fast forward into present day times, I reflect on my own experiences of when I come to applying for jobs, and sometimes on the screening forms, you have those questions of, are you a visible minority? Are you a female? Are you Indigenous? And oftentimes I catch myself thinking, should I actually check any of these boxes? Because when I get hired, if I get hired, I want to be hired for the merit of my work, the knowledge that I have, the skills that I bring to the job, not necessarily because I'm simply filling a quota. So, and Jason and I have talked about this in the past. It's great to have the conversations of diversity and inclusion, but what's the next step? How do we bring that into actionable items of equality? Equality in the workforce being something that is actually in the forefront when we're making these decisions. And how do we make it such that those individuals who are relying on for their experiences and their perspectives feel valued, and it's not just a token act. Let's move past that. And you know what, that just actually brings me to another thing that I heard this morning. So Apple came out with their Black Unity watch, and it's a watch to signify Black History Month, which is February. So they, the design's out there, it's Apple, it's going to be branded, it'll be marketed, it'll be sold, right? But what really caught me off guard was the fact that they stated a portion of the proceeds will go towards raising Black awareness. Now, for a business as big as Apple, Why is it just a portion? Why can't it be the entirety of the sale price if we really want to move the needle? And not to single Apple out, but that just happened this morning. I just heard it this morning. So it's just, I want to get past this form of tokenism and actually move to actionable items.
That's great. And absolutely, diversity and inclusion isn't just about race. So thank you to both of you for speaking on that. The next question, expand on the definition of diversity, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So again, diversity isn't exactly all about race. It's not about gender. It's about everything. So Jason, if you would like to speak on that, that would be great.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So to me, diversity is a variability of perspectives, people, background, skin color, language, age, sex, just name it, in a group or a community. And I think the good thing about diversity, because we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, the good thing about diversity is that diversity aids creativity and innovation. And listen to that. Studies have shown that diverse teams are 35% more productive than non-diverse teams, right? 35% more productive. So diversity is not only the right thing to do, but guess what? It's the more profitable thing to do, right? Because when you have diversity among your workforce, your organization would be more profitable, right? When it comes to the bad, right? And I think the bad thing is that we are discriminated against because of our differences, right? So because of the list of things that I just um, list out, we are basically discriminated against because of these things. And if we are dealing with the elephant in the room, one of the questions that I often ask myself is this: why do people get so uncomfortable anytime we speak about diversity? Why? And in response to that, many people say, well, we don't know much about the topic. That's why some people say we are not trained, we don't know how to approach it, we don't know where to start. And other people say that there isn't a problem. What are you talking about? And truth be told, right, we just don't want to talk about the issue because we don't have a real desire for change, right? And the reason why we are talking about it in the first place is because we are forced to talk about it. Everybody else is talking about it, so we might as well get on board, because we're going to look bad and we don't want to look bad, so we need to show face, right? And it's making us uncomfortable, and the reason why we are talking about it is because we are put under undue pressure. And I think if we go a step further and we look at the ugly thing about diversity is this: look at our communities. The face of our communities are changing, right? Our communities are more diverse than ever before. But yet, that diversity in the community is not reflected across public and private organizations. Why? And it therefore shows that people are still being discriminated against because of their skin color, because of their ethnicity, because of their race, because of their sex, just name it, that discrimination does exist. And it's time we make a real statement in eliminating this in our modern society.
Wow, thank you very much for sharing that, Jason. Now, Raj, how would you define diversity, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what Jason said, but maybe I'll just compartmentalize it a little bit more. For me, when thinking about diversity, I really sort of categorized it in four different areas. So there's internal diversity, so things such as race, ethnicity, age, gender, physical abilities, mental abilities. And then the external diversity that we all possess. So our personal interests, our education, our religious beliefs, the location. And then I would say the third one would be organizational diversity. So our job functions, our place of work, our management styles, our pay types, our seniority within an organization. And then our worldview diversity. So that could be things, political beliefs, our moral compass, our outlook on life. And I really think that having a workplace that's that has the ability to realize that showcasing or having these attributes within their workforce will really, like Jason said, not only help them become more productive, but it would also help, especially if you're in a public facing organization, in the government sector, for example, it would really help you to identify with your needs of the businesses, the needs of the residents. If you're able to bring a level of empathy towards what it is that they're feeling or what it is that they're experiencing, I think those are things that would assist us, not only in our job functions, but outside. Um, and I know this is something that we've spoken about in the past, but when we're called upon as members of a visible community, or just based on one's gender or economic status, to act on these committees and be the voice, there needs to be some reflection there of, while you're picking individuals who have attained a certain level of status within their community or within their job function, what about those that don't have that active voice, and how do we reach out to those individuals? And you know what, if we take that back into the workforce, sometimes it's those individuals that don't speak up that often that have the most to say. Sometimes it's those individuals that are quietly watching what's going on. And there's often a great quote that I like to always reflect on, is, when your loudest champions at your workforce start to become silent, I think you as a leader at that point need to do some self-reflection. Because if your champions are no longer there, and if they're no longer active and are participating in that discussion to move things forward, whether it be in the area of diversity or whether it be in the area of the job function, I think that's a real point of reflection for an organization or for a team. And oftentimes that's when people leave, right? If people see others being treated badly or being treated poorly or unfairly or whatever the case may be, that's often a time of self-reflection for that individual, and it's often a time when people leave.
Great. Yeah, no, absolutely, Raj. That also triggers a lot of mental health concerns as well. And we, as a growing population, we're very cautious of that, and very sensitive to that conversation as well. Thank you for speaking on that. The third question here is steps to establish, foster, and support an environment that embraces, celebrates diversity and equality in the workplace. Jason?
Yeah, so I have a few things to say about that. And the first thing I would say is that we need to do it. When we're talking about establishing, fostering, and supporting and embracing diversity in the workplace, we need to do it because we have an honest desire for real change. Because if we don't, then we are just wasting our time. And we shouldn't do it because we are trying to fill, quotas, or we're trying to look good because of optics and what have you. Because as I always say, pretending to want change is just as bad as doing nothing. So we need to do it because we honestly really want to have real and lasting change. And that is the reason why we should engage in conversation that would eventually lead to actions being taken. And the next thing I would say is that we need all hands on deck, because people believe that issues of diversity and inclusion and race and what have you is something that HR deals with, right? But guess what? Each and every one of us have a role to play, right? It starts with the individual. And once there is an individual desire, then that would affect the collective. And my mantra, one of my mantras in life is be the change that you want to see. So it starts with you to be that change. And the next thing I would say is to set measurable and practical goals, right? So instead of saying we would establish a committee to talk about diversity, and that's all we do, is talk about it. Why not set more measurable goals and say, by the end of year 3 or the next 3 to 5 years, we're gonna have 34, our workforce will be 35% more diverse than previous years. So these are real tangible things that we can try to do to achieve diversity in the in the workplace. And I think another thing is that we shouldn't invite diversity to the workplace if we are not intended to treat individuals properly, and that brings the conversation in a direction where we are now able to talk about equality and equity, right? So it's one thing to talk about diversity, but it's another thing to how do you treat the individuals when you invite them to come, right? And I think that's where we need to go to ensure that we have the rules, the policies, and the right training so that when individuals come and be a part of these organizations, they are treated fairly, and that's all that they are asking for. And I think the last thing in terms of a practical thing that we can do is try to implement hiring practices that eliminate unconscious and conscious biases. And guess what? 99.9% of the population has unbiased, unconscious biases. So that's all of us, right? We have these, right? Sometimes we are not aware of them, but they are there. And I think it calls for different organizations to, to implement different hiring practice that eliminate these biases. I know some organizations are now designing their hiring systems to hide identifiers, so like names and origin and sex and stuff like that. So the system would hide these things altogether. So when an application comes to an organization, they only see the qualification of that individual and they're able to make a decision based on that. Because guess what? A lot of people have been denied opportunities because they have a name that suggests that they are from a particular race or culture, right? So I think once we implement these steps, we will be well on our way in trying to foster, well, first establish, foster, and celebrate diversity in the workplace.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jason. Going back to your third point, I believe, um, the equality, including individuals of different race, sex, ethnic backgrounds, and what have you. What are some examples that you would suggest that organizations can implement and work with their employees?
Um, well, I think one of the things that can be done um, is to make sure that every employee is aware of the different rules as it relates to diversity in the workplace, right? Because there is a gap in terms of an understanding because people just do things, right? Because they're not aware of the fact that there is a rule against that and you're not supposed to do that. And I think that that's important as well. I also think one of the things that can be done is to celebrate small wins and recognize the people who are responsible for these wins, right? Because once you move outside the normal work setting and you bring people together, then you create an environment where people can talk to each other on a different level, right? And in a social setting, and you celebrate and you appreciate the contribution that all employees are making. So I think things like that can be helpful.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. Raj, how would you like to chime in on that? On steps to establish, foster, and support the environment that embraces and celebrates diversity and equality in the workplace?
Yeah, I think I would just like to add on to the conversation that we're already having in terms of actionable items, right? We can see large organizations such as LinkedIn, for example, and their tool of just that pronunciation function of one's name. You would not believe the amount of people that were talking about that once that happened amongst my social circle. And it was just this sense of, I no longer have to be that girl that's uncomfortable because someone's trying to pronounce my name and I'm the one that's feeling uncomfortable and I'm trying to stop them. Oh, like, don't worry, just call me Raj, right? Whereas now LinkedIn now introduced this function of taking out that sort of awkwardness, if you will, right? It's here is how you pronounce this person's name, and that person may still get it wrong, but I think as the person receiving that pronunciation, there's a level of appreciation that, hey, you went for it, you tried, right? I appreciate you trying to say my name. So there's a small win, right? There's something tangible. There's something that's bringing the needle a little bit closer to it's okay. And I think a lot of the times when we talk about diversity, inclusion, race, all these things, there's a level of, I don't want to overstep. I don't want to make that person feel uncomfortable. So in an effort to avoid all that awkwardness, we don't actually move the needle at all. We're just kind of stuck in the same position. And we're doing, this little dance of should I not? Is this okay? Is this not? Well, if we don't have that conversation and if we're not transparent, we're never going to get there. A small win that I saw when I joined Oakville that I was really proud to see was on our sort of intro web, we have a calendar, and that calendar denotes all the different cultural or religious festivals or holidays. And you can click on each one of those things and you can read more about it, right? So even though I might know what Ramadan is, I may not necessarily know the historical or religious prominence of it, or why it exists, or why people practice. And so those things, I think, bring a level of clarity as well, right? And a level of appreciation and understanding for one's coworkers. So things like that are really important. And I know working at a previous municipality, we had like potluck lunches, and this is all, pre-COVID, but we really strived to bring in different ethnic foods so people could try them and you could ask questions and you could, get to experience things in a comfortable environment without having to feel like, you have to go to a restaurant and you have to order something and you're not quite sure what it is. Well, here you're amongst coworkers, you're amongst sort of your work family, right? You can ask questions, you can figure out whether or not you like something, and you can learn a little bit more. So I would say just little tangible things that people can actually see that you're putting an effort in will help to make a more comfortable environment for people to take risks and to ask those questions and to be in a moment of awkwardness that is welcomed.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And absolutely, I mean, it can be sometimes overwhelming for individuals trying to pronounce the last name or a first name or anything like that. So knowing that you're on the same page as the person asking is great to know. Now I'm going to ask a few other questions for the audience. I'm sure they are wanting to know, have you ever had a challenge that you were faced with? And how did you overcome that challenge in regard to diversity, inclusion, and equality? Jason?
Well, one challenge that I had is that so I was sick, right? But my sickness wasn't deemed as a disability, right? And so when I got sick, I communicated that I would be taking, a couple of days off and stuff like that. And then when it was time to return to work, I was basically told that I cannot return unless I complete return to work documentation. That is the return to work documentation that is required for people with a sickness that is deemed a disability, right? So immediately I said, that is not applicable to me because I don't have a sickness. Um, and then I was told by other staff members that they didn't have to do that because they were sick and their sickness was deemed as a disability. So I was in a position where, like, I was seeing I was being treated unfairly with my other coworkers, right? So what I did, because I knew the different steps that I should take, right? I then initiated a review and I got the different individuals on board, and the matter was able to be resolved. But I'm just thinking about individuals who don't know the steps, the right steps to take, and have to be under a situation like that. It's sometimes it's very depressing. And then in addition to that, I wanted to say that sometimes when I came to Canada, for instance, I was so open-minded in terms of changing part of me that might be offensive to others, right? And over a period of time, it seems as though that desire for change is always one-sided, and I think we have to meet each other, halfway, Like, and change should come from every angle, and it shouldn't be one set of people or the visible minority people trying to be open-minded to change, adjusting how they do things to not come across offensive, and that is not met on the other side. So I think we have to reach to a place where we can achieve, change from both angles.
Thanks for sharing that, Jason. What about you, Raj? Have you ever experienced a challenge that you've been faced with, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily reflect on any one particular moment, but I would say in times where I've met individuals that don't necessarily understand my background, or, for example, don't know how to pronounce my name, or there's that sense of awkwardness. I often use those times as an opportunity to educate and to raise awareness, right? And also to ask further provoking questions of them, because if we all reflect back on it, we're all immigrants. No one actually, unless you're Indigenous, this is not your home, right? You came from some other place, your family settled here, and now this is your home. So let's all take a piece of that and let's all reflect on that, because just as much as I may look very different, you also have something to share, right? So let's talk. And I think that's an opportunity that we sometimes miss, right? Just because a family or you have been here for 6, 7 generations or whatever, you still have a history. And so if we all can sort of find common areas to relate to one another on, then I think there's an opportunity there to grow. Actually, just I can use an example of a previous municipality that I worked at, and ECDEV is sort of a very male-dominated environment. And the community that I was working with was predominantly agriculture and predominantly male farmers. And so when I would oftentimes go to their farm, first of all, I'm a woman, and secondly, I'm a person of color, and it was kind of like, whoa, where did she come from, and why are you here? So it took a little bit of time to raise that level of trust and to build that foundation with them. But historically, my ancestors are farmers as well, and so I really used that as a basis of building commonality with the farmers. And truth be told, we bonded over Mahindra tractors, and I was the only girl at the dinner table with a table full of like farmers, and it was fine. And then after that, we bonded, and we talked about farming and agriculture, and how do we move past different problems, and it was great, because that level of trust that I built with that group of 8 farmers then resonated throughout the entire community. And I had other farmers whom I never had met before calling me for advice or to come visit them on their farm. And so, I just reflect back on that situation. I could have taken it one of 2 ways, right? And I could have been really offended, and I could have like just got back in my car and left, and to heck with this, I don't want to deal with these people. Or take it as an opportunity that these group of individuals are just as unaware of who I am as I am unaware of who they are. And so how do we use that as an opportunity to learn?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Going back to Jason's point, it needs to be more than just one-sided. And when there's 2 people that are interested in hearing each other's stories, it makes for a better conversation and hopefully a relationship out of that. Thank you so much, Raj. So this ends our conversation on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Thank you so much again for joining in, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that session on the evolution of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Now we are going to get you guys engaged in the conversation. So we are actually going to have a poll where we will ask questions. I will ask the question. You guys can chime in on what your answer will be, and then I'll give a summary of the answers that we've received. How do you create a positive culture at work? Create culture days, create creative potluck lunches, educate employees with culture information on internal platforms, or all of the above? All right, so great participation. We have everyone involved in all of the above of the questions. So that's fantastic that everyone is embracing that in their workplace. On to the next question, please. Does your organization have a diversity and inclusion strategy? Yes, no, not yet. But after this session, I would like to see one implemented. All right, wow. So 51% yes, they do have a strategy in place. 15% say no. 34% say not yet, but after this session, I would like to see one implemented. Fantastic. Next question. Senior leadership is prepared to effectively manage a culturally diverse workforce. Yes, no, I prefer not to say. All right, so 66% say yes, 23% say no, and 11% say I prefer not to say. Great involvement, guys. So we are going to go on to the next question. Do you feel accepted, comfortable, and safe within your work organization? Yes, no, I prefer not to say. All right, so we have 86% with yes. So that's a great way. 6% say no, and 7% say I prefer not to say. Next question, please. Are diverse identities, ideas, and ways of thinking and working valued in your organization? Yes, no, I prefer not to say. All right, so the totals come in. 75% say yes, 15% say no, 10% say that they prefer not to say. Next question, please. My opinions, suggestions are heard and recognized. Yes, no, I prefer not to say. All right, so we have 84% say yes, 9% say no, and 7% say they prefer not to say. Last question, and then we'll go to the questions in the Q&A. I am included in decisions that affect my work. Yes, no, I prefer not to say. All right, so we have 74% say yes, 24% say no, and 3% say that they would not like to say. So that concludes the poll. Thank you so much for everyone for participating in that. it's nice to have engagement in some sort. So next we are going to go to the questions. So we have we have a few questions. This is great. Okay, let's see here. How important is it for organizations such as the public sector to reflect the diversity of the organization in senior management positions? In my work, I don't see that diversity is reflected. Jason, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, I think it's very, very, very important for that to be reflected, for diversity to be reflected there. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are observing is that diversity is not reflected in senior management, right? And because senior management is the least diverse, then I think organizations, especially public organizations, have to be very mindful in, educating senior management on the different considerations and implications about diversity there. So I think it's important, and I think organizations have to try the best to have diversity among senior management, because senior management is positioned in a way that they can then encourage that diversity throughout the organization. So I think it's imperative to have diversity, because it shows that the organizations are really trying to move and to be consistent with the time that we are living in.
Great, thank you so much, Jason. I'm not sure if Raj is joining us or not. Raj, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think for that question in particular, I think we need to also understand how organizations are structured, right? There are some organizations in which you have a unionized environment and, seniority plays a factor. So sometimes it's a combination of years on the job experience, as well as how long you've been at that particular organization that sort of help you to land those senior roles. And sometimes, just based on the fact that when individuals were hired, it was back when there was a particular type of demographic that was employed in the sector. And so, throughout the years, they've just gradually moved up the ladder. So sometimes we have those policy structures in place that sort of indirectly influence who gets those senior management roles. But is there a way beyond that we could sort of influence senior management and the way in which they think? Is there, internal senior committees that could be formed, or that could provide input to senior management as a way of informing and educating senior leaders on what is actually happening in terms of sort of a grassroots movement component? There's different ways that we could sort of look at it. But I think for those individuals that are young professionals just entering the workforce, or even marginalized communities that are entering the workforce, and you're entering and you're seeing a senior management team that isn't reflective, and you can't actually see yourself there, I think that's problematic. And I think that doesn't help to stimulate a notion of inclusiveness, or a notion of you too can inform change. So I think that's a real point of reflection for organizations, and it's something that we can all sort of improve upon.
Great, thanks you guys. So I think we have one more time for one more question. We are going to get on all right, you're talking a lot from large corporation perspectives, but what can be done to support micro, small businesses and efforts? Conversations could look very different. I tend to agree. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Jason?
Yeah, but I think the conversation that we are having, you can basically apply to any organization that you are in, right? And I wanted to make a point on the question that you asked in the polling about having a strategy. And I think that's where all organizations could start, is to implement a diversity strategy, a diversity and inclusion strategy. But here's the thing, right? When it comes to diversity and inclusion, many people believe that if you have diversity in your workplace, that means that you are inclusive. right? And that's not the case, right? Because diversity just means that you have people, of different background, ages, what have you, involved in your workplace. But inclusion is, are these people feeling included in the decisions that are being made? Are they feeling safe? Are they happy, in what is going on in your workplace? And I think it one thing that we need to do is to establish that strategy, and then we need to go a step further, and that is to implement the activities in that strategy, because it's vitally important. Because it's one thing to do a strategy and the strategy is sitting on the shelf, right? But it's another thing to implement the action items in there. And I think one of the things that we can do to ensure that the recommendations in the strategy are implemented is to ensure that everybody knows their role, right? Everybody knows exactly what they are expected to do so that implementation can take place. And I think once we have a strategy, which all organizations should try to achieve, then we are making strides in the right direction.
Thanks, Jason. What about you, Raj?
Yeah, I would echo what Jason said. It's great to have a strategy, but let's have some tangible deliverables and some actual timelines there to help illustrate the fact that this is a commitment that the organization has made, and that these are deliverables that we are going to deliver upon. Once those deliverables are achieved, and once you're successful in doing that, I think you're able to not only gain momentum in achieving the deliverables of the strategy, but you're able to get buy-in, right? You're able to get buy-in from all of your employees from all across the organization at all different job functions. And then once you have that, I think you can really develop some strong momentum to implement that change and to keep it going, rather than it being, a topic that's just relevant for the here and now. Let's make it so that it actually remains relevant, and it actually is something in the back of people's minds when they're carrying out their job functions, and also when they're being promoted to more senior management roles, so that their perspectives are varied and those are reflected in how the organization operates.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. Oh, Jason, you have one more thing to add?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, for small organizations, I think what is imperative for them also is to get leadership to buy in what they're trying to do. Because when it comes to diversity and diversity and inclusion in the workplace, it has to be a top-down approach, right? It cannot be the employees advocating for change, because there would always be tension. Management, the leadership has to buy in what is trying to be implemented and achieved, so that that change can be company wide, right, and trickle down from the top to the employees at the bottom.
Great points. Thank you, you guys, for chiming in on those questions and answers. I think that concludes our session today. Belinda?
Thanks so much, Heather, Jason, and Raj. That was a very thought-provoking session and very interesting. And thanks to everyone for participating in the polls, the chats, the Q&A. Great questions, everyone. In appreciation to our speakers, a contribution to the EDCO Scholarship Fund has been made on their behalf. All right, just some final housekeeping notes here. If you're like me and missing all of our great times at EDCO with handshakes, hugs, cocktail conversations with our friends, don't forget to join us at 4 o'clock for our virtual cocktail reception. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you'd like to join us, please register at the chat below, because we will be sending you a link to join us. And another reminder to visit the EDCO conference website, which has additional resources from our innovative partners. You can connect with them and see what they're doing through our Innovators Showcase directory. We also have some additional education provided by our partners on the Innovation on Demand page. You can see how they are evolving and creating resources for economic developers. Thank you again to Fregelman for sponsoring the Looking Over the Border Opportunities to Evolve On with CUSMA session. And we're looking forward to our upcoming sessions on Wednesday, February 10th. Those will be, is real estate king? and positioning Ontario's workforce for recovery in evolving times. And I just want to give a shout out again to our awesome conference planning committee, our conference planners and the EDCO staff. It's, as you can imagine, challenging putting together a virtual platform, but so far we're having great feedback. So thanks everyone. Today's sessions have now come to an end. Thank you for joining us this week for EDCO's Evolve On conference. Please look for your login details for next week's webinar on Tuesday, February 9th. Please check your spam or junk folders, and if you don't receive your login, please contact Taylor Chamberlain at the EDCO office. Please continue to connect with one another in the chat for the next 15 minutes. And thank you again for joining us on EDCO's Evolve On conference. See you on February 10th, everyone. Have a great day.